Welcome to the webinar. Good afternoon, and those who join us today, the presentation of Connecting Cultures Through STEM, Experience of the Caribbean and the US. The Institute of Professional Development is a pleasure to share this space for the entire education community, as we hope to share our work at the regional level. Today, we have the honor to present the result of successful efforts that have been achieved thanks to the joint work of the three entities that we have dedicated almost a year of important initiative. Firstly, we have the strategy partner from the International Teacher Education Network, an initiative of Organization of American States, which work with the Ministry of Education and several government institutions takes with the coach and preparing teacher from US member states in order to advance education across the region. In addition, we can, with the collaboration and technical guidance of Department of Documentation and Electronic Information of the Directorate of Technology Resources of the Department in charge of the Connection magazine, as well as the Institute of Professional Development, which serves as the central conduct for the strategy work. Soon, we have the pleasure to introduce three members of the IFAN who eventually participate and contribute to the article of the Connection magazine. In addition, we have the presence of both of the coordination item and the Connection magazine, respectively. Each of them will exhibit all the work they have to project. At the end of all the presentation, we have the time to dedicate for questions for all the participants. We encourage the question to be written in the chat. Esmeralda Zuniga will be charged of digitally asking for the panelists and supporting participants to write to whom they wish to make the inquiry. We'll begin with a brief presentation for Mr. Rebecca Vieira, who has been the IFAN coordination since September 2018. Previously, she served as coordination of the American Association of Physical Teachers. She has taught physics and engineering at the high school level. She earned the National Teaching Certification in 2010, was selected for the Presidential Award of Excellence in Science and Mathematics Teaching in 2013, and served as the Albert Einstein Distinguished Program Teacher at NASA Airways in 2014 and 15. Currently, she is a Science Education Doctoral Program candidate of the University of Maryland, and she has M Science Education with a specialization in teacher leadership and BS in physical teaching. So go ahead, Rebecca. We cannot hear you. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, again, I am the coordinator of the Inter-American Teacher Education Network located in Washington, D.C. in the United States, and I'm really pleased to be here today along with a number of co-authors of articles from the Conexiones special edition from February. Swani, are you able to put up my slides for me? Perfect. Thank you so much. Please go to the next slide. Perfect. So before we begin, I'd just like to give a very brief overview about what I-10 is. The Inter-American Teacher Education Network is an initiative of the Department of Human Development, Employment, and Education of the Organization of American States. It's funded by the U.S. Department of State, and basically our goal is to support STEM teachers all across Latin America and the Caribbean in particular, and really broadly across all of the Americas. This is the focus of our work for the past 3 years, and some of the presentations that you will see today are a product of many of these international collaborations. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we work all across the region. In 2019, when we started working on STEM education, we were working with, I think it was 11 countries. In 2020, we expanded to include more, and in 2021, we now work with a total of 25 member states. Next slide, please. And we also currently work with 53 teacher education institutions. So we work with ministries of education, we work with universities, normal schools that prepare teachers, as well as with private foundations and also professional societies that might have workshops and opportunities for teachers to develop. And since 2019, we've worked with over 120,000 teachers. Next slide, please. So you might wonder why STEM is a focus for us. Sometimes you may have also heard of STEAM, which includes the letter A for arts, or STEM plus H for the humanities, or STEM plus CS for computer science. The real focus on STEM teachers and STEM teaching is partly because of the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN. If you look at the global challenges that are facing us today, a lot of it comes down to ensuring that we're incorporating a scientific and a developmental understanding of the world. We realize that in particular, many young girls and women are often excluded from opportunities that allow them to think about a future in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics and related fields. And so we think it's really important to support teachers in those fields, not just science teachers and not just mathematics teachers, etc., but also all teachers from as early as early childhood, and those more generalist teachers who will also end up teaching these topics within their general classrooms. Next slide, please. So in February this year, we were very honored to work with the Ministry of Public Education in Costa Rica with their Conexiones journal, which historically has served around 70,000 teachers and other educational employees within ministry schools and things. But we were asked basically to bring the experiences of teachers and education leaders all around the region through I-10 to feature their work. And so the product of that was 11 articles that were published this past February. They're available online. And today we're going to hear from 3 of those authors and co-authors. Next slide, please. These are just the first 5 articles. Next slide, please. And of these, we will hear from Lynne Jorgensen today, who is a teacher in the United States, in the state of Arizona. We'll also be hearing from Zandria Banton, who's from Jamaica and is representing a very large Jamaican team. Next slide, please. And actually, next slide, please. And then we'll also be hearing from Janelle Malcolm, who is part of a collaboration between Jamaican educators and educators from Barbados. So that we hope that this gives you kind of a broader view of education and teacher education around the region. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I do want to add before we start our panel that on June 1st, in English and on June 2nd in Spanish, I-10 will be hosting a public event. That registration it's free, and we hope that you can come. We'll also be offering a very simple certificate. It's a 1.5-hour program, and during that time you'll be able to get to meet many of the authors of these articles, as well as quite a few of our members of I-10 and other educators who share similar passions. So with that, we're actually going to go ahead and move into our panel. And we're going to move on to Zandria Banton. So if we could get her picture up here. Zandria is a senior teacher of the Jamaica Teaching Council of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information of Jamaica. She's an English language and literature teacher who works to integrate STEM into her teaching. So if we could pull up her slide. We'll go ahead and let her begin, and then Zandria, if you just let us know when you'd like us to advance to the next slide, that would be excellent. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Can you hold your device up to your laptop for me so I can use your device, since we are being creative here. Thank you so much. Should I begin?
Go ahead, Zandria.
Good evening, fellow educators. As Rebecca just said, my name is Zandria Banton, and I am representing Team Jamaica Mrs. Carrion Harrison Campbell, and yours truly. And the theme for our presentation is From Root to Shoot, from STEM to the Stars. Next slide, please. In our presentation, you will learn how in 2018, Jamaica's Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, in collaboration with the Organization of American States, organized the first workshop that demonstrated the incorporation of stream lesson plan. The conductor of the workshop was an educator from the USA, and 40 teachers were attendees. Could you click on the next text box? Thank you very much. This was the Trainer of Trainer program, in which 40 attendees were tasked with training 10 additional teachers, resulting in 400 teachers being trained ultimately. This was followed by a rather rewarding trip to Peru. Now, the beauty of the Peru trip was that it taught the attendees how to utilize cost-effective resources, which could be used in the stream lesson plan. And there we have the smiling faces of the participants of both ventures. Now, the Peru trip was also rewarding, since the team from Jamaica met global leaders and educators in their field. Next slide. Thank you so much. Now, the trainer of trainer phase is depicted there, where we have the stream lesson plan being integrated with the 4 C's of education to create an effective and impactful learning experience for teachers of various subjects. So there we have teachers of home economics, English language, and so on, learning to integrate stream in their lesson plan. Next slide. Now, the experience in Peru was quite rewarding for the team from Jamaica, because they got an opportunity to interact with global leaders and educators, thus being stemming to Peru. Next slide. Now, let us learn a little bit more about the I-10 project team. Now, this was a team of educators who collaborated and worked with other educators in the US and St. Kitts and Nevis to share their experiences. Now, this enabled the participants to assist our current crop of 21st century learners to navigate the digital and information age. So there we see the collaboration going on, and the team of I-10 teachers from Jamaica with their global partners. Next slide. Through these collaborations, educators like our very own Mrs. Bagya Maladi returned to Jamaica with the confidence that the stream lesson plan could be integrated in her classroom to foster critical thinking and conceptual understanding. And these are necessary 21st century learning skills. Next slide. As part of the project, the team, including Mrs. Maladi, conducted a survey to ascertain teachers' use of STEM skills. It was found that 88% of teachers preferred demonstrations, whereas only a few gravitated towards student-centered strategies, which cultivate critical thinking skills. These findings provided the team of teachers with the necessary information so that they could empower other teachers. And we see here that the experience in Peru was still bearing fruit. Next slide. Now, as a result of that background information, it was time for action. Now, the results of the survey ignited in Mrs. Maladi a determination to assist and set an example for her colleagues. She conducted a workshop in a classroom setting wherein teachers learned how STREAM practices can be infused and fortified. Since the survey indicated that if teachers have the right tools, models, and training, then they will be better able to include STEM, the training provided by Mrs. Maladi was indeed quite necessary. Next slide. Now, the lessons learned from Peru were also seen in Mrs. Maladi's classroom practice, where her students of grade 7 created a robotic arm, and this was presented in an exhibition. Now, this exhibition was done using cost-effective recyclable material such as cardboard, water, syringes, etc. This workshop comprised over 200 students belonging to over 30 groups. This was quite an ambitious task. Next slide. And the lessons from Peru continued to be learned. From this, we learned that teachers don't need expensive materials for students to learn and practice STEM in the classroom. As depicted there, we see cheap, recyclable material, and students were able to engage their STEM skills. Next slide. Ultimately, the trip to Peru had a profound impact on Mrs. Maladi, as she was able to participate in an active learning in optics and photonics workshop. This engendered in her the confidence that she could motivate her students and inspire her colleagues. So she returned to Jamaica with much to impart. Next slide. Now, Mrs. Maladi took this rewarding experience in Peru even to our primary schools here in Jamaica. This was a very special move, as teachers of our younger ones were taught how to integrate STREAM in their lessons, and this bridged the gap between primary schools and secondary schools, a much needed effort. Next slide. So this is what STEM teacher leadership can look like. An effective STEM teacher leader is one who is not just capable of enhancing one's own skills, but can empower other teachers as well and uncover the leadership skills in all of us. All in all, as educators, from this, we learn that 1, STEM educators and STEM education can be inclusive, as it does not necessitate expensive resources. And 2, we also learn that STEM educators foster an environment in which students can develop 21st century skills. Next slide. There we see Mrs. Maladi demonstrating STEM skills. Next slide. And with that, we thank you. Thank you so much for providing us with this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Really appreciate it. All right, so we've had a chance to listen to Sandra tell us a story a little bit about how you know, through her work and in the context of I-10, they've been able to help really build leadership and make connections across the Jamaican island. So thank you so much for sharing that story. We'll come back with questions at the end of the panel, but if anybody does have questions from the attendees, please go ahead and type them in the chat. You're welcome to ask them in Spanish, and I will make sure that we translate them to English for the presenters. All right, at this point, we are going to move on to Lynne Jorgensen. Lynne is a physics teacher at Gilbert High School in the state of Arizona in the United States of America. For those of you who don't know where exactly that is, that's just north of Mexico. So it's kind of on the border there. She's also a I-10 teacher fellow, and so she also had that opportunity to participate in the trip to Peru and make connections with her colleagues. So Lynne, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
All right, thank you guys. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then hit present on this. And then if you can't see my screen at this point, someone, stop me. My name is Lynne Jorgensen. I am a high school physics teacher. And I have my focus in my area that I have really put my heart and soul into has been to supporting women and underrepresented in our STEM classrooms, to look for ways to find these girls and encourage them so that they have the confidence to continue in these fields. This is actually part of the abstract from the article in here, is that even though we've had great gains in the STEM fields, we've seen a lot of growth in the STEM fields in the last 20 years, we have not actually seen those growths in women. In the number of women in those fields. And so my article, things that I look for and have worked for in my classroom, is to look at how our confidence holds people back sometimes and how we can support that. How group work can both be beneficial and detrimental to women in our classrooms, and how we use Socratic questioning, how we work on questioning skills in our classroom can support women. A lot of these things can go both ways. We've seen a lot of detrimental activity, but we've seen a lot of growth as well. And so this is actually from, this is a slide of bachelor's degrees in the United States by fields, and we see a lot of growth in the computer science fields in that 20-year period. We see a lot of growth in the biology fields in that same period. A lot of growth, not a lot of growth in math and statistics, and not a lot of growth in physics, but major gains in some of these other fields. And yet when we see what women have done, it's flatlined, and worse, computer sciences has actually decreased in the last 15 years, along with physical sciences. So clearly how we are teaching our girls in our classrooms is not supporting them from there. And as a woman in physics, I have seen this and I have felt this. I know what it's like to be one of a handful of people in classes. When I first started my original program, my bachelor's degree in physics, there were quite a few women in my classes, in my physics and math classes. But by the time I got to the end, I was one of 3. There weren't as many women there at the end. So some of the effects that can affect women in our STEM courses and are underrepresented is confidence. Low confidence and fear of failure in high school really does put up a wall to their learning. They've decided in their head that it's just too hard and they should try something easier. Since it's too hard, they don't want to do it. This is something we see in high school kids all the time, where when something gets hard, maybe it's not for them. Maybe they're just not good enough. Maybe there's something else they should do instead. I did like this quote that was from the, I have to remember where it's from, sorry. This quote is from The Confidence Gap. It's that confidence is a belief in one's ability to succeed, a belief that stimulates action. And that's really the most important thing that we see in there. If they do not believe they can do it, students don't want to try. And so part of what we need to do as teachers is find ways to bolster their confidence so that they can make it through the struggles. Physics and STEM fields are hard, and there is going to be trials and there are going to be struggles, but if they don't have the confidence, they're not going to succeed. In the United States, we have seen that 40% of women will take an AP course, regardless of their grades, that only 40% who take an advanced placement course will take their advanced placement exam. And in the United Kingdom, these were both, by the way, both of these studies came from the Cracking the Code article that Rebecca referenced at the beginning. It's an incredible article talking about women in STEM fields. In the United Kingdom, in fact, at 10 to 11 years old, that age, boys and girls equally like science, but 8 years later, that drops to a third and only 20% of girls still are interested in science, which means we need to be doing more to help them and support them. So moving forward, we need to be encouraging our students individually, not as a class whole up front saying, hey, you guys can do this, great job, but going and finding them individually and talking to them, promoting self-confidence and explicitly reinforcing their abilities. So things we can do on there, we can have direct students. We can direct our students to female students for help, show that they are the experts, provide students with good feedback, reassurance, and yeah, let them know that we struggled through some of these things too, and that we have made it to where we are. We need to provide encouragement and support, and then help them recognize that there is value in the different types of skills. There's communication skills, teamwork skills, and that creativity. Those skills are the basis of STEM. We can use Socratic seminars or inquiry approaches in our classrooms where students collaborate in planning and conducting their experiments. And then we can use whole class discussions to present and justify their conclusions based on their lab. In our class, we use that data that they collected in the lab, each of those lab groups, to then come up with a whole class consensus that is supported by data. Some of the things we can do, we can ask higher order questions to help them dig deeper and develop stronger connections between topics. One of the things I loved, I'm pretty sure it was from the Jamaica team at our Peru conference, was that not only were STEM that we're looking for, but we are looking for critical thinkers and conceptual understanding. I loved that idea to it, that those other acronyms were important. So asking questions to help clarify and not just kind of, well, this is what you meant, right? But I heard you say, what can you clarify that? What evidence do you have? And then have them apply knowledge to different situations. What would happen if you did this? I know it's not on the graph, but what would you predict would happen at this point in time based on your data? Going deeper into questions. So moving forward, this set of, on this slide actually came from the American Institute of Physics and their Step Up for Physics program. That this is part of their discourse to help have equity in the classroom. That we want to share time equitably. We need to work on valuing our differences and teaching our kids that their perspective is not the only one. And that we need to argue using evidence. So back up whatever we have to say with data. We want to especially make sure that everyone feels safe in our classroom, safe to share their thoughts and ideas, even if they feel like they're the minority. And that really, this is hard for students, especially in high school, to teach them that being uncomfortable, a little bit of discomfort is really okay. That is where growth happens. And then we need to own our impact. Sometimes as teachers, our intention, what we intend in our classroom, is not what actually happens. So we need to make sure our impact matches up with what our intentions are, that we are supporting people in a positive, reinforcing way. I will apologize at this moment. You're seeing a lot of words. I am awful at taking pictures in my classroom when I do activities and other stuff, and that is something I have to work on and do better on, is to share visually what we do as well. The other one is especially with group dynamics. Female students are often marginalized in group work. They have often, because of unsupportive group dynamics, and a lot of them have bad experiences in the past. A lot of students don't have a lot of good experiences using lab equipment. And so this quote was again from another research study we did found in the that's referenced in my article, that women are systematically seen as less authoritative and their influences is systematically lower. They are speaking less, and when they're speaking up, they're not being listened to as much, and they are being interrupted more. That is a huge deal. We need to make sure that our girls have equal airtime. Group dynamics can really be super supportive and really helpful to women, but it can also be detrimental if we are not careful in our group selection with labs and with other things. But I love that this study and this not study, I lost the word. This piece of data here that when you have a woman alone with 4 men, 70%, nearly all of the interruptions are negative. But when you have 4 women in the same group, 20% are negative. And so having super majorities of women to support each other is really important on there. So group dynamics moving forward, things that we can do to help is that remembering first and foremost in group activities, all students should have equal opportunity to assume active roles and contribute to those group discussions. All students, the higher end students and the lower end students, the male and the female, we have to make sure our students have an equal opportunity to be role models, to be contributors. And we do that when we can promote a sense of community. We as teachers need to distribute our attention to students during class discussions, making sure that we are uniform in those attentions, giving some of them a little struggling students more attention and helpful. Choosing group members. When students are allowed to pick their own groups, they'll pick their friends, but then they aren't always comfortable critiquing and explaining to their friends why they think they're wrong and what needs to change. This has been a big push for me, is avoiding isolating women in groups of mostly men. I have tried to make sure that, you know, there is never a single girl with a whole group. The exception, of course, was this year where in one class I had 1 single female student. There was no way to not have her be the only girl in a group. And so I was very particular with the groups I did put her with. I put her with calmer, quieter people where she would feel comfortable with. And I was really careful in particular in her placement to make sure she was comfortable at all times. So we really work with those things as we go through. So some of the things we have to really remember as teachers that I have found is small changes. None of these are big things that we're asking people to be aware of, but small teaching changes can have big impacts on them. We need to make sure that we have our end goal is to have more female voices in our STEM fields. We need their perspective to help advance these fields. As female students see more women in STEM fields and they're aware of their impact, their confidence in their own abilities can grow. And so the goal is to not only help our female students find more success, we want all of our students to find more success and support from all of their peers, that is the goal in mind on there. And so I thank you guys for your participation and listening. Oh wait.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for your wonderful presentation and especially for delving into that data for us. All right, at this point, we are going to move forward with Janelle Malcolm. Like Zandria, who we heard from first, Janelle is a senior teacher of the Jamaica Teaching Council of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information of Jamaica. Janelle is a chemistry and biology teacher at Immaculate Conception High School, and she is an I-10 project team member in collaboration with colleagues from Barbados, Mexico, and the United States. Now, I understand, Janelle, you're able to share your screen. Do you want to go ahead and give that a try?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. Are you guys able to see my screen? Please say yes.
We can see you, but we don't see your screen share.
Oh, wow, I thought I got it. Thought I had it. Okay, hold on. One sec.
And if not, we'll just go ahead and ask Swani to help us out.
Go ahead. It's okay. All right.
Swani, would you go ahead and put up the slides then? Perfect. Thank you. Okay, take it away.
All right. Okay, guys. So, good afternoon, colleagues. Let's go into the tale of two teachers, authored by Mrs. Claudette Funkong, Mr. Conroy Hall, Mrs. Cheryl Sobers, and Miss Janelle Malcolm. This team represents a fusion of Bayesian and Jamaican culture, as teachers from Jamaica and Barbados collaborated on this article. This article is about a story of how two teachers adapted their teaching practice in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. Now let's meet these brave souls, okay? Separated by only a few miles of water, both were teaching in the Caribbean. One teaches at the primary level in Barbados, that's Barbara, and the other at the secondary level in Jamaica, called Jacinto, that's her name. Both were forced by COVID-19 pandemic to modify the pedagogy and teaching practices as they were forced to transition from teaching in their traditional brick and mortar classrooms into an online virtual one during the period of March to June 2020. Next slide. Now, in Barbados, Barbara was guided by an integrated science curriculum designed for learners between the ages of 9 and 10. And so let's take a journey into Barbara's classroom before and during COVID. Next slide. All right. Now this is during COVID. That was before. All right, and that is Barbara's teaching story in Barbados, pre and post COVID. Now we have Jacinto in Jamaica, guided by a specialized curriculum, all right, but focused on biology. Her learners were between the ages of 15 and 17, and basically her aim was to try and prepare them as best as possible to sit a regional external exam in June of 2020. Now, let's take a journey into Jacinto's classroom. There is some sound. Are we able to hear the sound?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's fine. That's okay. Let's go into Jacinto's classroom. I will talk.
I think Swani might be trying to reshare it here.
Okay, great. No problem. Thank you, Swani. I appreciate it. during COVID? Neurons are one. All right, ladies, it is on page 2 and the time has begun. Alison, why is it that your drawings always look so fancy? You clearly love art. Come on, Alison, time is going. Come on, yes, that's right, Nisha boy. Keep it going. Yes, Dalila, that's right. No, but your drawing looks nice too. All these pretty drawings. 42 seconds, guys. 42 seconds. All right, 42 seconds. Come on. Darwin Paul's contribution talks about the ability of a neuron to allow us. All right. Okay, so for both teachers, experiments could no longer be conducted with the use of standardized lab equipment and procedures, but the students were forced to conduct experiments using materials readily available at home. Students were now faced with the challenge of making adaptations to equipment, quantities, and the properties of reagents used. The online environment introduced several variables and challenges that ranged from the availability of equipment to the quality and quantity of the reagents used, which forced the students to make adaptations and decisions independent of their teacher and to derive their own possible explanations for the outcomes they received. Or takeaways from our article. The children were no longer slaves to procedure and instruction. There was ownership. They showed ownership of their learning. They owned the conclusions that they drew, as the multiple variables forced the teachers to kind of let go and allow the kids to take charge. And so there was genuine inquiry as they questioned the observations without any prompting from the teacher. Both teachers experienced tremendous growth in inquiry-based instruction and are now more confident in allowing their learners to direct their learning experience instead of recreating a sterile environment as opposed to genuine discovery and explanation. Jacinta's classes seem to infuse not just Zoom and Google Classroom pictures and videos, but other applications. Ask yourselves, did this difference in the use of technology make a stark difference in the products? In the authenticity of the tasks? No, it didn't. Because as Dr. Winsome Gordon says, you're still teaching It's just where that has changed. So teachers, whether you use one app or 5, think of its connection to your objectives. Yes, technology aids virtual learning, but at the end of the day, as Mr. Conroy Hall, a co-author, says, let's not get caught up in the functionalities of these online tools. Or, as another wise co-author, Mrs. Claudette Foncon, says, hashtag pedagogy trumps technology all the way. So be encouraged, colleagues, as we adapt to the new normal. And whether you use one application or 2, continue to teach and inspire. Thank you for your time and support. Thanks to my co-authors. Next slide. Thank you for your time and support. Thanks to my co-authors, Mrs. Claudette Foncon, Mr. Conroy Hall, Mrs. Cheryl Sobers, and Ms. Janelle Malcolm. And thanks especially to the facilitators of this webinar and I-10 for basically fostering an international community of educators.
Thank you so much, Ms. Malcolm, Janelle, for your presentation and for sharing us the way that teachers have had to be flexible under the current circumstance and maybe some of the ways that we've changed, hopefully for the better, despite knowing how much of a challenge it's been. Thank you. All right. Lastly, we are going to receive a presentation now from Pilar Sanchez Madrigal. She's a librarian and basically serves on the editorial team for Conexiones journal with the the Ministry of Public Education in Costa Rica. Her official title is coordinator of the Conexiones magazine in the Department of Documentation and Electronic Information of the Directorate of Technological Resources and Education. She's going to share with us a little bit now about the process of becoming an author, just like the wonderful ladies and also their co-authors that you heard from today. And Maria del Pilar will be presenting in Spanish, and I will be interpreting to the best of my ability right after she speaks. So go ahead, Pilar. Adelante, Pilar.
Gracias, Rebeca. Por favor, me confirman, voy a presentar.
Okay. So go ahead and share her slides now.
¿Pueden ver mi presentación, sí?
Sí.
Perfecto. Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Para mí es un placer estar acá con ustedes.
Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure for me to be here with you today.
La revista Conexiones es la revista del Ministerio de Educación Pública de Costa Rica y la trabajamos desde la Dirección de Recursos Tecnológicos en Educación.
So the Conexiones Journal is a publication of the Ministry of Education and of the Directorate of Technological Resources and Education.
Voy a hablarles un poco de la revista Conexiones y de el trabajo que realizamos con la red en esta presentación muy brevemente.
I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about the journal and also our collaboration with I-10, just very briefly.
La revista Conexiones es una revista completamente digital y accesible para las personas con discapacidad.
The journal is completely available online and it's also accessible to those who might have disabilities.
Es una revista cuatrimestral, la cual se publica en los meses de febrero, junio y octubre, y a veces tenemos una versión en diciembre.
So it comes out 4 times a year in February, June, October, and sometimes in December.
La revista posee una trayectoria ya de 13 años de existencia ininterrumpida de edición.
We've been publishing for the past 13 years without missing any editions.
Bueno, es una revista que ha realizado diferentes alianzas para realizar tipos de revistas especiales.
And it's a journal that has also often entered into special relationships so that we often have special editions as well.
Una de estas es la que estamos presentando hoy, pero hemos tenido también con bibliotecas escolares, orientación y otras disciplinas.
So this is basically like an example of what you're seeing here with the special edition with I-10, but we've also had special relationships with libraries and other educational institutions that need special editions.
La revista Conexiones es una revista que normalmente está compuesta por 7 artículos, pero la que realizamos con la RIET fue de 11 debido al gran interés de los autores.
So typically we publish about 7 articles per edition, and in the case of working with I-10, we actually had 11 because of the high demand for publishing.
Entonces, desde ya les doy las gracias por ese apoyo a todos los autores y nos seguimos esperando en la revista.
And so I'd really like to extend my gratitude to those who have published with us, and I really hope that others of you will also consider, submitting articles.
Les voy a explicar en este punto cómo fue la experiencia específicamente con el trabajo con la RIET.
So I'm going to go ahead and explain to you a little bit about this process of what creating a special edition looks like by using the example of I-10.
La revista la realizamos aproximadamente durante 10 meses, un año.
It took us about 10 months or almost a year in order to complete the whole process.
Este proceso fue coordinado y logramos llegar a esta coordinación por medio del IDP, por Laura Mesa.
And basically we carried this work out through the guidance of IDPUGS, which is basically the Institute for Teacher Professional Development of Costa Rica.
Realizamos diferentes reuniones por medio de Zoom, por medio de correo electrónico y así realizamos el trabajo que fue muy arduo, pero tuvimos muy buen trabajo en equipo.
We had a number of Zoom meetings, we had lots of exchanges by email, and it was a lot of work, but we really did achieve a lot as a team.
Para mí muy importante es explicarles en este momento el objetivo de la revista Conexiones.
So I think it's really important for us to all understand, or for me to explain at this moment, what the objective exactly is of the journal.
La revista Conexiones inició pensándose solo para Costa Rica, pero debido a esta edición hemos salido de las fronteras.
So initially the journal was really only intended for educators of Costa Rica, but because of this collaboration that we've had, we're now really starting to think beyond our own borders.
En esta buscamos propiciar un espacio donde se reúnan las ideas, pensamientos y sentires.
So we really hope that this is a place where people can share their experiences, their feelings, and yeah, basically that.
Se pretende que la revista genere un análisis y una reflexión en los escenarios educativos.
And we really hope that it helps people to be reflective, to do an analysis basically of these shared experiences across the region.
La misión principal de la revista es ser una herramienta didáctica que contribuya al proceso educativo.
So our real objective is for the journal to be a tool for advancing education.
Utilizamos el lenguaje escrito, pero sin dejar de lado el aspecto cognitivo.
So, we really focus on the linguistic element, the written narrative, but we, don't want to leave behind the cognitive component of it.
Hemos logrado crear entornos investigativos más allá de nuestro país junto a los autores de esta edición.
We've really been able to expand kind of the spaces in which educational research is being done, through this journal.
La misión de nuestra revista es ser una plataforma tecnológica para todos los docentes de nuestro país y ahora fuera de las fronteras.
And so really we hope that our journal becomes that platform for, educational innovation, not just in our own country, but also, again, beyond borders.
Quiero expresarles un poco las normas editoriales de nuestra revista.
I want to explain to you a little bit about the editorial norms of our journal.
Los artículos normalmente deben realizarse en letra Arial, a espacio y medio y de forma digital.
So typically we only accept articles in a digital format. They need to be in Arial 12 font and 1.5 spacing.
La extensión del artículo varía, pero normalmente vemos que son mínimo 6 y máximo 10 páginas.
So we have some variability with regards to article length, but we look at a minimum of 6 pages and a maximum of 10.
Debemos incorporar un resumen en español y una traducción en inglés o viceversa, ya que estamos recibiendo artículos también en inglés.
So yes, we must have a summary both in English and also in Spanish because we're welcome to receive manuscripts in either language.
Para la elaboración de estos resúmenes, estamos utilizando la norma ISO 214-1976.
So we use the ISO standard 214-1976.
La ubicación debe ser en el documento, en la parte superior del documento.
The abstract must be at the top of the document.
Algunos autores deciden iniciar su artículo con una frase célebre o una frase personal.
A lot of our authors like to begin their article with some kind of a famous quote or a personal statement.
Y tratamos que el artículo esté en voz activa en tercera persona.
And we really try to make sure that we encourage the use of active voice and also third person.
Adicionalmente, tenemos 3 palabras claves y máximo 5 y deben estar en inglés y en español en orden alfabético.
And then we also require all our manuscripts have 3 to 5 keywords in Spanish and also in English in alphabetical order.
Y las normas de citación y referencia que utilizamos son las normas APA.
And we always use APA format for all of our citations and references.
Y este año estamos utilizando la 6ª edición. Para el otro año ya iniciaríamos con la 7ª edición.
And we're currently using the 6th edition of APA. I know there's just as an added note, there is a 7th edition of APA, but they are not currently using it because it has not yet been translated into Spanish. So 6th edition.
En este caso, les quiero comentar un poco para que vean todo el proceso que realizamos en la edición de esta revista y todas las demás ediciones.
So I just want to tell you a little bit more about the process of, the editorial review of an article from the moment it's submitted to the final manuscript.
Lo primero es recibir el artículo y hacemos la primera revisión y si hay algún ajuste lo enviamos al autor.
So first of all, we receive the article and if we need anything major that must be changed, we'll return it back to the author.
Seguidamente hacemos un filtro de similitudes donde vemos que el artículo sea completamente auténtico, inédito y que no posea ningún tipo de referencia mal hecha.
After this, we send it through a plagiarism check, which just makes sure that it's completely authentic, that they're just a plagiarism check to make sure that there isn't any phrases that have been taken directly without being appropriately cited.
Después de este paso, seguimos con el par ciego.
After this, we pass through peer review.
El par ciego consiste en una persona experta realiza la revisión del artículo.
So what peer review consists of is that we'll find an expert on the topic and then they'll go ahead and review the article.
La persona que realiza la revisión no sabe quién es el autor y el autor no sabe quién realizó la revisión.
It's called double-blinded because the author does not know who the reviewer is and the reviewer also does not know who the author is.
Después de esto, el par ciego nos indicaría si el artículo es publicable o no.
And then the peer review, the reviewer will let us know whether it's publishable or not.
Después de esto, se realiza la revisión filológica.
After this, we do an editorial review to check for language and grammar.
Después de esto, realizamos lo que es la diagramación, que es la revisión, el diseño de la revista ya junta con todos los artículos.
And then after this, we do the layout, which includes the design and laying it out within the actual document of the journal.
Después de esto, realizamos una revisión de ese diseño y terminamos con nuestra revista final.
And then after that, we do a final review of our design, and then that's the final version of the journal.
Como ven, es un proceso bastante largo y en este caso quiero agradecer a Rebeca por todo el apoyo que nos brindó y a todos los autores.
So you can see it's quite a long process, and I'd like to thank Rebecca and also all of the authors for going through it.
Ahora quiero contarles un poco en qué estamos trabajando en este momento en la revista.
So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about what we're currently working on with this journal.
Primero que todo, estamos buscando que la revista esté indexada en el repositorio Latindex.
So first of all, we're trying to ensure that the journal is indexed in Latindex.
Este repositorio le brinda a la revista un criterio más académico y sale de nuestras fronteras.
If we are able to do that, it basically gives us a little bit more of an academic credential and helps us to get, again, beyond our borders and out there in the wider community.
Debido a esto, estamos realizando un sitio propio para la revista.
And because of that, we're starting to develop our own website for the journal.
Y ya hemos podido elaborar el comité asesor.
And with that, we have an advisory committee that we've been developing.
Que está compuesto por profesionales de las diferentes universidades públicas de Costa Rica.
And currently it includes lots of experts from Costa Rica's public universities.
Y tenemos un representante de una universidad en Estados Unidos.
And we also have a representative from a university in the United States.
Y finalmente estamos, debido a este enlace que hicimos con la red, hemos recibido muchísimas más solicitudes para hacer ediciones especiales.
And thanks to this original collaboration, we've now received a number of additional requests for special editions.
Finalmente, quiero invitarlos a seguir escribiendo en nuestra revista.
Perdón, ¿lo puedes repetir?
Quisiera invitarlos finalmente para que escriban en nuestra revista.
And so finally, I'd really like to issue an invitation to all of you to consider submitting your manuscript to our journal.
Estaremos recibiendo artículos, pueden enviarlos en inglés o español.
So you can go ahead and we'll just be continuing to receive them on an ongoing basis. Just send them to the email that you see here, and you can send them either in English or in Spanish.
El correo sería revistaconexiones@mep.go.cr.
And the journal email address is revistaconexiones@mep.go.cr.
Muchísimas gracias y de nuevo quisiera extender mi agradecimiento a la red y a todos sus autores, ya que sin ustedes no hubiéramos podido hacer esta revista.
And so, thank you again for your attention, and we're excited to have you published in our journal. All right, thank you so much, Pilar, for your presentation and for sharing with us the process. Because we've heard today from 3 panelists who have some very unique experiences, having been part of an international community, and now they are starting to build that legacy, right, through publication. And I really, really hope, on behalf of I-10, I really hope that you'll all consider doing that. At this time, we actually have quite a few questions, and I may not be able to get through all of them, but I would like to go ahead and start with Zandria. Zandria, do I have you here? Make sure your audio is working. Can you hear me, Zandria? Let's see. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, excellent. All right, thank you. So my first question for you has to do with the fact, actually, that you are an English and a literature teacher. And so the question is, in the article, it talked about moving from STEM to STREAM, which includes the arts. And I'm curious to know, in your own experience, have you been able to include any STEM or STREAM in teaching English or language arts? And what does that look like for you personally?
Indeed, I have been integrating the skills from STEM and by extension STREAM. For instance, I have assigned my students activities where they have to create models, thereby utilizing their engineering skills. I have assigned my students mind maps, thereby integrating their mathematical skills, and giving students other activities such as creating digital posters, creating a Google site for a character, and activities like those. So indeed, I have been integrating the STEM or STREAM skills into my lessons. And I have been seeing more of that since the introduction of STREAM in the Jamaican educational psyche. I think the Jamaica Teaching Council has done a great job in sensitizing teachers who are generally outside of the STEM realm. And so we're consciously integrating STEM in our lessons.
Great, thank you. And I have actually one more question for you before I move on to Lynn. The next one's actually about the process of writing the article, because you had quite a crew of people who were involved in writing the article. So what was the biggest challenge of writing a collaborative article? And what advice would you give to others who want to do the same?
Well, personally, the challenge that I found a bit difficult to grapple with was time management. Of course, because of the challenges brought on by the pandemic, teachers had to re-strategize, and our roles morphed into other things, and planning became a little bit more time consuming. So time management, finding the time to write my contribution to the article, meeting with our team to plan our article, that was that I found to be the biggest challenge. And I would recommend what my team did. What we did was that we planned ahead. We scheduled our Zoom meetings, and Mrs. Maladi, Mrs. Russell, Mrs. Campbell, Berzana, Dr. Thomas, they all tried their best to ensure that they were at the meetings. We found the time, we met, as I said before, we planned ahead, and we tried to be disciplined in how we met, and we tried to focus on the topics and focus on the task at hand. So that's what I would recommend. Plan ahead and be disciplined.
Great, thank you. Yes, it's quite a process to write an article, let alone with a group of people, for sure. But we're glad.
Indeed.
We're glad you did. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to Lynn now. So Lynn, you spoke quite a bit to what teachers can do to help encourage students and to help ensure that there's an equitable classroom environment. But I'm curious to know about what you think about the influence of parents, particularly, let's say, bad experiences that might impact students. And I'm assuming this might be related to parents who might discourage children from pursuing certain careers, or actually, in addition, kind of supplemental to this question, the idea that STEM might encourage or might cause a young woman or girl to feel as though she's lost her feminine qualities. So how do you respond to that, particularly if it's parents that are pushing back against you?
I don't have, my bigger part with parents is in our area, parents are really concerned with grades. And so they look at physics as a hard subject, and so they don't want it to be detrimental to their children's grades. Where they don't always realize is how integral and crucial physics is to every single STEM field there is. And so a lot of what we do is there are resources. We talk about it at the Meet the Teacher nights. We talk about it at our school does a big elective fair the year before this in the spring to get kids ready and excited about things, and parents are welcome to come and see what our schools offer. I bring out the toys, I bring out the stuff and show that physics is accessible. I heard this from another teacher. You don't need to be a good physicist a good physics student to do blank. But being a physics, having taken physics, expands the possibilities for you. And so making it open to the parents so they can see as well. There's a lot of great things. I know in the United States, PBS and the Smithsonian have a Meet the Scientist program where you can look up different scientists, and they have a fairly decent representation, men, women, different races, different backgrounds on there. We have activities where we can research careers based on STEM fields, and they see how much physics is involved. As that second comment of loss of feminine qualities, that one makes me laugh. I apologize, but it does. The idea of feminine qualities, feminine means to be of or like a female. And so women are smart. Women need to understand that it is okay to be smart. One of the research topics we talked about was from Cornell. It was from the PhD math program, where men would come out of a class and say, man, that was a hard test. But girls would come out of that same class, same GPA, same cognitive ability, same intellectual ability, and they'd say that, you know, I knew I wasn't good enough. And so having support at home and a support system and recognizing where the support is crucial. It really is very important to that. And if it's not coming from home, it needs to come from school, that they can do this. I know exactly what that comment of how will that affect romantic partners and loss of feminine ones. I can count on one hand the number of dates I went on with people. And when I told them my degree in college was physics, and the response was, oh, wow, you must be really smart then. I didn't go out with them again, because that does not make a girl feel good. It demeans what we can do. And it hurts. It is incredibly hurtful to have someone like, wow, you did that? It's kind of a backhanded, it's very much a slap to the face of what we can do. And so finding encouragement and seeing other women in those STEM fields, in computer science, in physics, in chemistry, helps girls and helps their parents recognize what they can do as well.
Great, thank you, Lynn. And along those lines, I think, so let's imagine now, let's say you have a young woman who's interested in, or who has selected a career in STEM, and they're getting ready to leave your classroom. So you no longer need, in some sense, to encourage them to select a career, because they might have something in mind and see a future for themselves. What kind of advice would you give to that young woman?
To remember what they are capable of. That all of life, no matter what they try, there's going to be ups and downs, and it's going to be hard. But to remember why they're doing what they want to do. Why did they choose this path? That's what's going to get them through, and that they are capable of it. And, you know, to find a support system, find someone they can always come back and talk to us, find someone that they can talk to and have as a support when they move on as well is really important. Having support is what matters most.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn. And then for Janelle, we've got a couple questions here. What do you think is the biggest lesson that you or your co-author team has learned from the pandemic? What have you learned, and what are you going to take forward? Do we have you there, Janelle? I think we might, oh, there you are.
Yeah, hi. I'm trying to unmute, it's not unmuting me.
Okay, well, we can hear you now. Did you hear my question?
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes, we can now.
It says I'm muted.
No worries.
Teams, interesting technology. Okay, so definitely in terms of lessons learned, wow, 2 words, let go. Definitely, I like to control a few things. So like even a while ago, you know, we were doing a presentation and I had to be like, okay, all right, let's let somebody else. You know, I'm not really that good at letting go, but I was forced. I had no choice. Because at the end of the day, you know, no matter how I said to them, okay, if we were doing an experiment on separating techniques, and we were looking at crystallization, and of course, you know, the first stage is to form that supersaturated solution, and they came out with containers of various sizes, And even though I said to them, okay, yeah, man, just add about 2 tablespoons. When they came out with those containers, they were huge. I was just like, okay. They were like, Miss, I couldn't make the super saturated solution from 2 tablespoons, so I added more. And I was like, okay, all right. Well, I didn't have to tell you. So I think that whole thing of me constantly crafting questions that would lead them to a particular path, as opposed to allowing them to find that path on their own, is definitely my biggest takeaway from this pandemic. And I'm going to speak also for Cheryl, aka Barbara. I really think that we both had to kind of just, you know, let go, and we realized that, oh my God, these kids really, I mean, they just need us to guide them. I mean, I've heard it, but they just need us to guide them, point them in the right direction, and then they go off and do these amazing things. So definitely 2 words: let go. That is my biggest lesson. Yeah.
Perfect. And another question for you. I know in the article you compared the experience of somebody in Jamaica and the experience of somebody in Barbados, and then probably through your I-10 experience, or other communities you might have, you've probably seen teachers across the Caribbean struggle. Has it looked like the same struggle for every country, or have you noted differences between countries?
I've noticed differences between countries. I mean, some teachers were obviously using technology prior to COVID. And so their ability to transition into this virtual classroom was a bit smoother, because this is something they were already doing. They're just now doing it at home over their computers, no biggie. But for those of us who weren't using that much technology, or who probably were just using it, very casually, just for 1 or 2 things, it was kind of like, okay, wow, first Zoom. Okay, how do I share screen? All right, how do I share sound? There was so much. And so there was a steeper learning curve for some of us, for sure. But I believe, though, in the end, I think both the ones who are obviously ahead and the ones who are getting there, who are working on it, I think the ones who are working on it have shown some serious tenacity, in the sense that they teach themselves these apps, they come back and they teach others. And so I found that sense of community was so important, where persons were actually sharing their knowledge on these various apps. And for Jamaica, we had the Jamaica Teaching Council was actually the ones that spearheaded this initiative, and they just pretty much, first they grabbed on the master teachers, and then of course Mrs. Maladi grabbed on a member of a colleague such as myself. And I was just like, Mrs. Maladi, I don't think. And she's like, no, Malcolm, tools, come Malcolm, come. And I was like, all right. And so you kind of realize that despite where you think you might be as an educator, that you have something to contribute to the larger community. And if everybody saw themselves as such, then there would be like greater growth, and we would all realize each other's value a little bit more, and also realize that we're not alone. We are not alone. And so, JTC was my first introduction to the community. And then, of course, Mrs. Maladi was like, do you want to work on a project team? And then I met I-10. And I'm just all for communities right now, because the support is so necessary, especially during this time, because you're home alone, you're teaching, you're doing whatever. And it's so good to know that, hey, there's somebody else out there in the struggle, or somebody else that you can go to that would give you, or suggest solutions that could help you with your class. So, yeah.
Great. Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. We have some questions also about Conexiones, the journal. One of the questions is, if I submit an article today, how long will it take for it to be published? So, Pilar, para ti una pregunta, si alguien fuera a someter un manuscrito hoy, ¿para cuándo sería publicado?
Gracias, Rebeca. Sí, en ese caso tendríamos que ver la disponibilidad de la revista.
We'd have to, so the answer to that question is we'd really have to find out what the availability is in terms of spaces of the journal.
Pero en ese caso le estaríamos indicando primero que todo si el artículo se puede publicar.
Of course, first we'd have to let them know if the article is publishable.
Y estaríamos indicándole en qué edición se lo podríamos publicar.
And we'd also have to let them know in which edition we'd be able to publish it. Gracias. Another question is the journal free? I just put in the chat, you should have the link to the journal. Again, much of it is in Spanish, but then the edition that was published, the first edition of the year, is available in English and also in Spanish. And I believe that the journal will just be publishing English and Spanish side by side if they receive those articles. Let me check with Pilar if that's correct. Pilar, ¿es verdad que si alguien somete un artículo en español o en inglés, se publican juntos los dos? No en paralelo, pero tendrás artículos en inglés y en español en la misma edición, ¿cierto?
Sí, hicimos, por solicitud fue que se hizo esta primera vez y era una edición especial. Se hicieron 2 ediciones, una en español y una en inglés.
So in the particular I-10 edition, we did something special where we had an edition fully in English and an edition fully in Spanish, but typically they'll just publish in the original language. Okay.
Pero en las ediciones ordinarias se publica el artículo según la lengua materna en la que venga.
Perfecto, es lo que dije. Yep.
Okay.
All right, so she confirms. Thank you so much. All right, at this point, I think I'm going to hand it, well, let me just say, I am so grateful to the IDEPUGS of the Ministry of Public Education of Costa Rica. I am so grateful for Conexiones and their team at the Pilar specifically for all of the work. Translating articles and then editing them on top of it makes everything doubly as hard, but it was well worth it, and I'm very, very grateful. I'm grateful to all of the authors as well for being willing, in many cases, to be first-time authors. I think that's a phenomenal lifetime achievement, and I-10 is here to support and help in any way we can. And I think at this point, I will hand it over to Swani to close out the session.
Thank you. From the Institute for Professional Development, we want to thank each of you who had participated in this webinar. We thank the Inter-American Teacher Education Network for supporting the teachers in the region and encouraging them to grow professionally with this type of activity, and the Connection magazine for making the publication of each of these valuable articles a reality. We especially thank each of the teachers on the region who want to share their experience in this great initiative. This has been a really great learning experience and allow us to see in our Inter-American network there are many aspects that unite us and help us to grow for education well-being of the students. We invite you to follow our social network so that you are informed and updated on the all different training strategies we offer. Also, we have a group in Spanish to share experience and resources and STEAM for children on Facebook. Remember to register to attend us in the link provided. Have a nice afternoon.